to another episode of Hidden Stories Healed Now. Today we're going to talk about an important thing. You know, we all think about our health and our wellness. Today our guest is going to share her journey around triple negative breast cancer. It is my honor to introduce to you Tiah Tomlin Harris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I would love for you to share with our audience a little bit about your journey around breast cancer.
Sure. I was diagnosed at the age of 38 with triple negative breast cancer. It was stage 2A. I discovered the breast cancer, unfortunately, by doing a self-breast exam. I had been doing self-breast exams since I was in middle school in the 7th grade. I learned about breast exams because at the time, my aunt was actually diagnosed with breast cancer. And it wasn't a conversation that we had in our family, but in school, I learned about, breast health. And I knew that my aunt had a mastectomy. The way that we said it was she lost her breast. We didn't talk about the medical term, but we didn't talk about it. And so I started doing self-breast exams since I was in the 7th grade and found the lump in my breast while in the shower.
Wow. So, of course, we're hearing the importance of breast self-exams. Check those boobies. We got to make sure we do that. So in terms of finding this, tell us a little bit about once you found the lump. Did you immediately go get help? Did you know that it was something that you should do? Were you nervous? Were you concerned? What was that process like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you asked that question because when I felt the lump, I knew immediately it was breast cancer. And people say, how do you know? It's just, your body. And I tried to really psych myself out of thinking it's breast cancer. You try to stay as positive as you can. So the next morning I laid down and did a self-breast exam because we're taught, not only doing it stand up, but also to lay down because the tissue moves. And so I did it while laying down and I didn't feel anything. But I knew that I still needed to go. I said, it's a $25 copay. When I sat up, I felt it again and I decided to go. And I went to my gynecologist. And when I went to the gynecologist, she felt it and sent me to get a mammogram and an ultrasound. Now I was 38 years old, so I wasn't of the age of getting a mammogram. And so when I got the mammogram, people were coming in and out, and I'm still sitting there. And they did the ultrasound, and then they came back and said, we need to do a biopsy. And so when they did the biopsy, they called me back and said 3 days later, and of course it was, a grueling time period waiting for that phone call. And they said, it's breast cancer. And that was all that I heard. I didn't hear anything else. And the tears just started to fall. And it was devastating. 38 years old, not married, no kids, was climbing the corporate ladder and wondering, what's next? What's going to happen? Am I going to survive from this? So it was definitely devastating.
So when I can imagine, as we all think about this waiting period of 3 days, right? That 3 days feels like a year long,
Yeah.
right? And trying to get through it. And waiting until, okay, now I have the results. What's next? So in your process of looking at what's next, so now you've been told, you have breast cancer. Your aunt had breast cancer. Do you connect the two at that point to say, oh, am I going to lose my breast too? Or were your emotions even there? Was it just what does this mean for me?
Yeah, so the emotions were even worse. The first thing you thought about is, am I going to live? Forget the breast. Am I going to live and survive this disease? Because, one, being young, I've never knew anyone who was, my age or younger with breast cancer. And my aunt, she wasn't a blood relative. So I knew that it didn't run in my family. But prior to the diagnosis of breast cancer for myself, my brother was diagnosed at 32 with testicular cancer.
Oh, no.
Stage 4, he was 32 years old, and they had given my brother 6 months to live. And so he's living, he's doing great, thank God. But I knew that something was wrong when I felt the lump in my breast. And so that fear kicked in. And I just said, okay, God, this is me and you. It's nothing nobody else can do. This is something between you and I need you. And you see me through this, I'm going to help as many women as I can. And that's what I committed myself to being able to do. But I needed to learn more about this disease that I was diagnosed with.
Okay. When did you find out it was triple negative breast cancer?
So after going to my oncologist, well, the first person I saw was a breast surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to do more testing to really determine what subtype of breast cancer was. I didn't even know there was different types of breast cancer. And when she explained to me about the different types of breast cancer, and I kind of chuckled because one of the things that she said is if it is triple negative, you won't be on medication for the next, 5 to 10 years of your life. I actually got excited and I said, I hope it's triple negative. Not realizing that triple negative was actually one of the worst types of breast cancer to be diagnosed with because it's very aggressive and it's not hormone based. So they don't know how to really target it from a hormone standpoint. And when I got the phone call that it was triple negative, again, I was excited. And it wasn't until my oncologist really broke it down to me to say, this is going to be a hard one to treat. There are not a whole lot of options for triple negative breast cancer.
Oh my gosh. I can imagine the emotions at this point are just all over the place. You thought you were supposed to be happy because you got one set of information, and then you go to an oncologist and you find out, no, it's really very hard to treat and in terms of moving forward. So, all right, we have the disease. You're feeling something. You're saying that it was between you and God. What could people do at that point to help you? If that stage of finding out, how can they support you through that?
Well, I think what's really important for me, what they could do to support me is just show up, be there for me. If you say you're going to be there, be there. Other things that I needed was, of course, going back and forth to treatment. That was really tough. I didn't really want to be out in the public because your immune system is suppressed. And so I didn't want to position myself to get sick from something else. And I just call, I'm alive. Call me, check on me, see how I'm doing. And that's really what it was for me. And unfortunately, at the time, my company was laying off, having a layoff. And I was really silent about it. Some of my friends and family knew, but I couldn't go out on social media to just share my story, what I was going through, to even solicit more help because I was afraid of losing my insurance. Not even just the job or the income. I was afraid to lose the insurance to cover the cost of my treatment. And I didn't want it to change and having to be on Medicaid because of what society has talked about when it comes to Medicaid. So I was afraid. And I started going to support groups to try to find the support that I was looking for. But what I needed was really to learn more about the disease and then my friends and family to just call and check on me, see how I'm doing.
We're going to take a station break, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the conversations of those phone calls and how they trigger or don't trigger, as well as talking about the stereotypes that come with Medicaid. We'll be right back.
Every story has a hidden element that is not often shared. Hidden Stories, Healed Now, with host Vicki Wright Hamilton, seeks to share the hidden gems in real-life experiences. Our guests are ordinary people sharing their stories of overcoming insurmountable odds while providing hope and inspiration.
Welcome back. As you can see, we're talking about a very, very serious challenge that we have, and I know it's a lot in Black women, of triple negative breast cancer. So let's first talk about, you said you needed people to call. The first thing is people go, what do I say? I can't take it away. I can't make it all right. What do I really say? I'm struggling with the words. I want you to know I care. I'm here with you. But sometimes people are like, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear that. Can you give us a little guidance about what's okay, what's not from your perspective? I know it's individual, but it may help someone else.
Yeah, I would definitely say the first thing you do not say is when someone says to you, "Hey, I was diagnosed with breast cancer." Please do not tell us, "I had an aunt or a family member that was diagnosed with breast cancer and they died." I need all of the hope that I can get to fight. I need all of the positivity. And I know that people mean well, but oftentimes that's how they connect because they don't know what to say. Talk to me like you would if I wasn't diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm still alive. I'm still here. I still want to enjoy life. All of our conversations does not have to be centered around breast cancer or what I'm going through. You can say, "Hey, girl, how are you doing?" As I would say, "Hey, girl, hey,"
Mhm.
just to check on me and see how I'm doing. But let's have a generic conversation. Talk about your day. Talk about what's going on in your life. I may not be able to give that same rebuttal back in terms of, "Hey, this is what I did today because I'm undergoing treatment. I'm seeing the doctors or what have you." But let's still have a conversation. Let's laugh. Let's talk about memories. Um, I'm still in a position to be able to go places. I may not go to all of the places that I used to, but invite me to the movies. I think a lot of times because people don't know what to say, and being that they don't know enough about the disease, except for what is being portrayed, of course, death, dying from this disease, that's what they take on. And so they separate themselves from you. And a lot of us, unfortunately, have lost friends behind breast cancer. And I remember when I was actually going through, I didn't share with everyone because I needed to go through the process. There, hills and valleys that you go through. It's the diagnosis. It's getting your port put in. It's your first treatment, chemo treatment. It's the loss of the hair. All of those things. It's a lot to have to keep saying over and over and reliving the diagnosis or hearing that phone call, "It's cancer." And so I didn't share with everyone at that time because I just needed to get to a place where I felt like I was strong enough to talk about it without crying. And I had a cousin who I had not talked to in several years. She called, and the first thing that she said to me not was, "Hey, cuz, how are you doing? I know it's been a while we haven't talked." It was, "Well, what is this secret all about? Why is no one talking about it?" And she made it about her instead of checking on me. I'm the one that's diagnosed. And so I think those are some things that we have to be mindful of when we're talking to friends, loved ones, family, even, colleagues who have been diagnosed. Still treat them the same. Don't treat me as though I'm dying or treat me as someone different because my will is to survive and to thrive. So I need all of that positive energy. I need to laugh, you know, offer to pray with me or don't even ask me what I need. Just, just do. Sometimes we ask, "What can I do for you?" Just do. Grocery store, gas cards, things of that nature to help the financial burden because that's another piece that we go through financially. We take a hit between co-pays and going to the doctor, driving back and forth, gas, parking, even having to pay for parking. So just step in and just do, and you don't have to even ask.
Those are very good tips because there are things that we could that are action. So it's not offensive to you if they don't say anything about your cancer. It is okay if we do have a conversation and allow you the opportunity to bring it up when you're ready to talk about it in terms of making
Absolutely.
it happen.
Absolutely. And one other thing I would say too is oftentimes we have friends that are diagnosed and we want to connect them with someone else who's been diagnosed. Let the person who is newly diagnosed, they're not always ready to have a conversation. So we have to be mindful and ask that person because oftentimes people want to connect others to myself. And I will say back to them, no, that person needs to be ready to have that conversation. You can give them my information to call me, but I don't want to call them because they may not want to share their story.
Mhm.
It's so many different emotions that we're dealing with. We're already dealing with life as it is. And to
Mhm.
throw breast cancer on top of that makes it even more challenging. So find out if that person is ready to have a conversation because I need them to hear me when I do have that conversation with them.
I never thought about that. I always think about making a connection because they went through it, they could help you go through it. I never thought about the fact that you have to also be ready too. And I think that's something for all of us to keep in mind is understanding that the other person needs to be ready when it happens and not just do an automatic connection. So I appreciate that tip. You said something else in the last segment that I want to follow back up on, and you talked about Medicaid. I didn't want to go on Medicaid, and I didn't want to be perceived, with those perceptions. Can you talk a little bit more about that thought process, where you are when you have these medical expenses? It's not like I'll go on Medicaid, anything else I need to get help kind of deal. Um, how did you overcome that? Tell me a little bit about that process that you went through.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, oftentimes we think of Medicaid as a lesser quality of care. And that's what's really important, because a lot of I guess you can call them the top-notch doctors,
Mhm.
they may not take Medicaid. And so, those who are going through and have and I'll say quote unquote good insurance, right? Because that's what people will tend to call it, the insurance through your company, your employer, or what have you. We really want to make sure that we're getting quality of care. And that's really what it boils down to. And not position ourselves where there's certain things that we need that Medicaid may not cover. So that was kind of a fear for me. And again, that's also with the lack of education as well, of knowledge about the programs that are available when it comes to Medicaid and breast cancer. But I think that's the big fear that many of us have when we're going through, is we want to make sure that we get the quality of care. But even if you have the again, good insurance through your
Mhm.
employer or what have you, it does not mean that you're still going to get quality of care. And especially for Black women, because this disease hits us different. And we know the disparities when it comes to breast cancer, how it affects Black women differently. And sometimes we don't know what is considered to be standard of care. Are we even getting it, whether you have Medicaid or not? And so I think what it boils down to at the end of the day is advocating for yourself. That is something that is really, really important. Understanding how to ask the right questions, understanding, to talk to your doctors to make sure that you're getting what you need. And it goes back to what I said previously, is talking to other survivors so that you would know the right questions to ask so you can get the quality of care.
It's interesting. We talk about the perceptions that Medicaid is not getting quality of
Mhm.
care, and that it's a lesser of the insurance. Just in a quick 30 seconds before we take a break, can you tell us a little bit about how you researched to make sure that my fears of Medicaid really aren't that it's a less quality of care, that they really do have programs?
I think the biggest thing is talking to others. We now have social media, and what tends to happen in the breast cancer community is women connect with other women. Women join groups, and so when you're able to talk to other people, you start to learn about the programs that are available. I had never been on Medicaid, so I didn't really know much about how to go about getting it. Should I find myself in a position to need it?
Mhm.
But there are programs out here. There, the breast, like in Georgia, we have the breast and cervical cancer program. So any woman who's diagnosed with this disease, they can receive the care that they need and they deserve, and not have to worry about all of those co-pays and things of that nature. They can go through this process. And I will say, hopefully, in a seamless manner, right? When it
Mhm.
comes to the insurance piece. But again, a lot of the doctors don't take the different Medicaid plans. And so having a conversation with other women will help you to understand, who are on Medicaid, what doctors did they go see,
Mhm.
what treatment options were available to them. One of the things about Medicaid that I have found is the clinical trial piece. And it's not covered. And that's the biggest fear that women have, is, should I find myself where the treatment is not working and I need to undergo a clinical trial, that option is not available for me at no cost to me, because again, that's the insurance that I'm on and it doesn't cover it. So
So we're going to take a station break. When we come back, I want to follow up on a couple of things that you mentioned, and also see if we have a question or a comment from the audience. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.
Every story has a hidden element that is not often shared. Hidden Stories, Healed Now, with host Vicki Wright Hamilton, seeks to share the hidden gems in real-life experiences. Our guests are ordinary people sharing their stories of overcoming insurmountable odds while providing hope and inspiration.
Welcome back. I want to talk about something that, as we were talking about triple negative cancer in Black women. Can you give us a little bit of insights of, we say it is different for Black women. How is it different? I mean, help us understand what this means, because that's the tagline. It's triple negative breast cancer, and Black women watch out. It's targeted towards us. Can you help me understand a little bit in our audience about what's the difference and what that means?
Yeah, so there's a few pieces here, which is a great question, and thanks for asking. So there's a few pieces here. One, there's breast cancer in general, right? When we look at breast cancer in general, Black women are 40% more likely to die from this disease. And unfortunately, in Atlanta, Black women are 45% more likely to die from breast cancer. So the mortality rate right then and there, just breast cancer alone, is very different. When we start to look at other statistics, Black women are more likely to have been diagnosed with a later stage of breast cancer. So the cancer would spread beyond the breast into the lymph nodes. The other piece is we're 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer, and 3 times more likely to die from the disease. So those are the pieces where breast cancer, and we call it Black breast cancer because it hits us differently. Although at one point in time, white women were more likely to be diagnosed, but Black women were more likely to die from the disease. Now we're starting to see Black women are just as much likely to be diagnosed. And recently, I want to say maybe last month, the American Cancer Society came out with their report, their cancer report for African Americans. Breast cancer is now the leading cause of cancer-related death for Black women. So just those disparities alone says it's different for us. Now, when it comes to triple negative, we're more likely to be diagnosed with this aggressive form of breast cancer. And like I said before, we really don't know where it's coming from. They're really trying to figure this out. When we think about breast cancer, and the reason why I said breast cancer in general, because we think about genetics, right? Only 5 to 10% of women who are diagnosed with the disease do have a genetic mutation. So then the question is, what about the 90%? Where is it coming from? And so it's not just genetics. We're really trying to identify, where is this disease coming from?
Wow. Oh my gosh. I mean, to think that it didn't have to run in the family, nobody had to have it, and now you're the first one, and why, right? And where is it coming from? That's powerful. I really appreciate you sharing some of those statistics with us so our audience can understand, the different kinds and the different segmentation as it becomes to even Black women versus other women. Let's see if we have a question or a comment from the audience.
So Tiah, thank you for sharing your story. You actually reminded me 10 years ago, my executive assistant was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, and she actually had a lump, and she was afraid to go to the doctor. And I actually had to stand over her at her desk while she made the appointment. And then I took her to the doctor because I was so concerned that she wasn't going to go. So thank you for sharing that. So with that in mind, kind of as a backdrop for me and for you, what advice do you have for Black women as it relates to their health and their breast health? What would you say to them?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much for taking her to the doctor, because oftentimes we have so many things going on in our families and in our lives that we don't put ourselves first. And so we will delay. We will delay going to see the doctor to get the care. It could be one, we don't have the insurance. It could be just the fear of knowing it's breast cancer, especially if you're a single mom, you have children, or, you're married, a woman who's married with children. We tend to not put ourselves first. Now, when it comes to our breast health, we got to start having the conversation. This is something that we don't talk about. And as I mentioned before, that my mother didn't talk about breast health growing up. And even now, it's something we don't talk about. But it's something that is so important, because it's the one thing that has taken us out as Black women. We've got to talk about breast health. We can talk about everything else under the sun. Even, artists make songs about it. But we've got to talk about the thing that is taking us out, and that's breast health. We also have to start teaching our young girls. I started a campaign called Breast Health Matters. And the reason why I started that is because my goal is to educate 1,000 Black women and young teens about breast health. Not only breast health, but breast cancer, as well as risk factors and ways to reduce their risk of being diagnosed with the disease. But I think it's something that's so important to have the conversation with these young girls. Young girls are the influencers in our families and our communities and our homes. They're the ones that's going to learn it and go back to our mothers or their grandmothers and say, have you checked your breasts? My biggest thing is I'll say, hey, girl, hey, have you checked your breast today? And so we have to start having that conversation. The other thing that we're not talking about too is society has gotten so big on, beauty, right? We wear makeup and I see it on Instagram and Facebook all the time and what's the other one? TikTok. We beat our face, right? Because we want to be so beautiful. But what we're not realizing is a lot of those products that we're using are cancer-causing, have cancer-causing chemicals in them. And we're not having that conversation. Black women spend 9 times more than any other race when it comes to personal care items in the beauty industry. We are the biggest spenders, but we have the highest body burden as well. Those products are not good for us. And when you go into our community, unfortunately, you see them on every beauty supply stores on every single corner, right? But a lot of those products that they're selling are not good for us. We don't know about that. And we continue to use these products over and over, not just only makeup, but even skincare, And so one of the things that I try to do is educate women on really learning how to read those labels, learning to know what to look for in those products so they can eliminate the use of those products. Now, it's not only just that, but it's also, of course, what you put in your body, what you eat, really consider a plant-based diet. I always say we have cancer cells in our body, all of us. Our bodies are constantly feeding it. So you have to ask yourself, am I feeding cancer or am I fighting it? When you look at your daily regimen, your daily diet, ask yourself, have I eaten something that is going to feed cancer or is it going to fight cancer? Because again, we want to eliminate it. And we've got to move our bodies. I call it healthy habits. We've got to move our bodies.
Yeah.
And it's not just for the exercise, but we have to understand the lymphatic system.
Yeah.
And of course, I could go on and on and on and talk about this because I'm very passionate about it. But it's very important. And rest. I can't stress that enough. We've got to get rest.
Thank you so, so much. And there's enough in this topic that don't be surprised if you see a part 2. Because I think there's a lot of things that are very important here that she's talking about, what to eat, how to eat, things that contribute and what they make up. So I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your journey with the audience. Can you all join me in thanking my guests today? Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Hidden Stories Healed Now, where when we tell our stories, we set ourselves free. See you next time.